Okay, let's talk about organ systems and the human body. This is probably going to be a very long video. But in class, we're going to be splitting this whole lecture up over like 2 or 3 weeks. So, but what I'm going to do for the videos, I'm going to record everything all at once. So that way, whatever you miss, you can go and you can find it in this video. You're also going to see spliced into here pictures from your textbook that you can cut out and glue into your journal, okay? So all of this is going to be written into a little booklet that we're going to glue into our journal. So let's go ahead and get started. This is on the very, very front page. Go ahead and copy down the learning objective, right? We're basically learning the main functions of all of these organ systems, and we're going to be learning the parts of them and kind of the functions of the parts as well, okay? So to start off with, the integumentary system is a really complicated word for your skin, okay? It's your skin, your hair, your nails, all of that stuff, okay? It's on the very outside of your body. And so the integumentary system is going to protect us from injury and infection. Imagine if you bumped into your desk and you didn't have skin, right? Or you fell down in the grass during PE. That would be pretty bad. So it's going to protect us from injury, right? It's going to protect us from infection. Imagine if we didn't have skin and your friend sneezed on you. That would be really gross, right? You would be way more likely to get sick if that happened. And it also helps us regulate temperature by sweating, and also by raising our little hairs, right? Whenever you get cold, right, you've probably felt your little hairs raise up, or you get like goosebumps and stuff. So that's actually helping you retain heat, so you can be a little bit warmer whenever it's cold outside. You sweat so that the water in your sweat can evaporate, and that helps lower your body temperature so you don't get overheated, okay? So that's basically what it does, right? It's just protecting and helping you regulate. Here are some of the main parts, right, of the integumentary system. We have a sweat gland right here. We have a hair follicle. Sebaceous glands are actually going to release oil so that your skin doesn't dry out. You'll notice that we have different layers of the skin. The top layer is called the epidermis, and then the middle layer is the dermis, and the very bottom layer is the hypodermis. You don't need to learn all of that, but it's good to know that we do have different layers. Here is the picture from your textbook that basically shows the same thing. So make sure that you cut this out and glue it into your journal. On to the muscular system. This is basically for movement, right? This is how your body moves. All of the movement that your body does, it's the muscular system that's responsible for it. We have 3 different types of organs. We have 3 different types of muscles that are responsible for movement. To start off with, we have skeletal muscles that are attached to your bones. And so this is what allows you to write your notes down, right, with your pencil. This is what allows you to walk to your next class. Then we have cardiac muscles, which are in your heart. Some may argue that these are like the hardest working muscles, right? Because your heart never, ever, ever stops, right? And they never, your cardiac muscles never take a rest. But this is what's pumping your blood all throughout your body. And then we have smooth muscles, which are part of your digestive system. So like, when your food goes down your esophagus, it's not gravity that's making it go down your esophagus. It's actually smooth muscles that are pushing it down to get to your stomach. Your stomach muscles churn the food, right, to mix it with the acids and everything. And then it goes through your intestines, right, and then eventually gets expelled. And so it's your smooth muscles in your anus and also your smooth muscles in your bladder that keep you from having an accident, right? So be grateful for your smooth muscles. Babies don't have full control of their smooth muscles, right? This is why they need diapers. And so smooth muscles and cardiac muscles are considered involuntary muscles because you don't have to think about it, right? They're just kind of like doing their own thing on their own, right? Skeletal muscles would be voluntary muscles because you have to think about moving them and you decide when to move them. Here are a few of the muscles labeled. You do not have to memorize these, but do know that there are different muscles you probably have heard of, like the bicep and the tricep and the quadriceps, and different muscles that you have that do different jobs. Here is the same thing, and this is the picture that you have in your textbook. On to the skeletal system. Obviously, it's for protection, right? We have our skull that protects our brain. We have the rib cage that's going to protect our heart and our lungs. It's also for support. It gives us our shape. Imagine if we didn't have a skeleton. We would basically be like an octopus, right? We would be like on the ground, kind of just like slithering around, I guess, because we wouldn't have anything that actually makes us stand up straight, right? Or helps keep us straight up. It also produces blood cells, and obviously it provides for movement, right? We have our skeletal muscles that are attached to the bones that make it possible for us to move. So we have bones, right? We have cartilage, like in your nose and your ears. You also have cartilage around your rib cage, and it's kind of just like a soft bone. Here are some of the parts of your skeleton, but we're going to kind of go into this a lot deeper. Here's a picture from your textbook, but we are actually going to make a model of the skeletal system that we're going to glue into our journal, okay? So again, we have bones, right? We have joints, and we have cartilage. Joints are going to be where the bones meet and they bend, like you have your knee joints and your elbow joints, and things like that. And don't forget that they also make our red blood cells, right? And they store fat and minerals like calcium. Here is the model that you are going to put into your journal. I glued this on blue paper so that you could see that if you do a good job coloring it, you don't have to do a really good job cutting it out, okay? So you're going to put this in your journal and you're going to label all of the parts. Here's the example of where you do have to do a good job cutting it out, right? Wherever the pieces overlap, make sure that you cut out along these lines here so that when they overlap, you can't see any white. Same thing here, right? Where the backbone meets the pelvis, you're gonna have to do a good job cutting that out so that it can overlap. And here's everything that your model needs to have, right? You have to have all of these labels, right? 22 labels. You'll notice that some of them are on here twice, like phalanges, because you have phalanges in your fingers and you have phalanges in your toes. And so make sure that you label everything. Make sure that you have a title, and then you need to write 2 sentences. One sentence talking about the advantages of your model, right? What's good about it? Like, how does it help us understand the skeletal system, right? And then one sentence talking about its limitations. How could you make it better? How is it not exactly like the real thing? What is it not really doing for us? Okay. So you must have the title, you must have your 22 labels, and you have to have your 2 sentences for your skeletal system. And it is going to be a test grade. On to the nervous system. The nervous system transmits messages, and they're basically electrical messages that are coming to the brain and from the brain. And we've kind of got like a main street right here, which is your spinal cord. And so all messages are going to travel through your spinal cord to get to your brain, or they're going to come from your brain, go down your spinal cord, and then branch off. For example, you're writing your notes right now. The message is going from your brain, down your spinal cord, down your arm, to your fingertips, telling you what letters to write down. When you feel your paper, the message is going from your fingertips, up your arm, to your spinal cord, and then to the brain. And so it's basically a highway system for these electrical messages, and the one that's in charge is your brain. You can get spinal cord injuries like this picture down here, and that can cause paralysis because it's basically creating like a roadblock in your spinal cord, right? And so if you get an injury pretty far low down, right, you can become what's called a paraplegic because you can't use your legs. If you get an injury that's a little bit higher up, you could be a quadriplegic. You can't use your arms or your legs, or you can't feel them because those messages are not going to your brain down to them to move, right? Or they're not coming back up from those parts to get to your brain so that you can feel those parts of your body. Here's the picture from your book. And here's a basic breakdown of the main parts of the nervous system. You have your central nervous system, right, which is made up of the brain and the spinal cord, right? And then you have your peripheral nervous system. The word peripheral means like outside, okay? So your peripheral nervous system is going to be what's outside the brain and the spinal cord, right? It's going to be all the nerves and branches that are transmitting these messages. We are going to make a brain hat, and you're going to need to label all of these parts that I have in red and write down the function of each. I'm going to have a separate video showing you how to put your brain hat together. But basically, your brain has different sections, right? And the different sections of your brain are actually responsible for different things. Like your temporal lobe, which is right here near your ears, makes sense, right? It's responsible for listening. Your frontal lobe, which is right here, is responsible for emotion and personality. Your parietal lobe, which is basically kind of like at the crown, the very top of your head, is responsible for sensory things like taste and feel. And then your occipital lobe, way back here, kind of like right behind your eyes, right, is going to be responsible for vision. Your brainstem, which leads down to your spinal cord, is responsible for a lot of involuntary things like breathing, heartbeat, and digestion. And then your cerebellum, which is also way back here at the base of your brain, is going to be responsible for balance and movement. So if you injure any of these parts, it can affect you in different ways, right? For example, if you injure your temporal lobe, it can affect your hearing, right? If you injure your frontal lobe, which is actually responsible for memory, it can cause you to have amnesia, right? Where you can't like remember who you are, or things like that. So, there's like a myth that says that, oh, people only use 10% of your brain. No, that's not true. Everybody uses 100% of their brain, because all the brain is responsible for different things. All the different parts are responsible for different things. And we use all of our brain. Here is a breakdown of what your hat is going to look like. And I have written the functions over here on this poster also, which I'll have hanging up in the room. The digestive system breaks down food into nutrients. The digestive process starts off with your mouth and chewing, right? And so we also need to talk about mechanical and chemical digestion here as well. So the mechanical digestion, right, which has to do with movement, starts with your teeth. It's basically the breakdown of the food. So imagine that I give you an Oreo cookie, okay? And you start chewing on it. When you chew on it and break it apart, it's still an Oreo cookie, right? So that's technically a physical change, or what we call mechanical digestion. It's just breaking it apart. But when your saliva, which actually has enzymes in it, it's acidic and starts to break down the food, that's a chemical change, right? So we call that chemical digestion. So chemical digestion actually happens with your saliva. Once you swallow it, it's going to travel down your esophagus, which is just basically a tube that transports it, right? With those smooth muscles pushing the food down. It's going to transport it to the stomach, where a lot more acids are going to be added to the food, and really start the serious chemical digestion here, and basically churn it and mix it and get it all nice and digested. It's going to go to the duodenum or the duodenum here, and then that's when the liver is going to the liver basically creates or makes bile, which is stored in the gallbladder. And so that's going to the gallbladder is going to send bile to the duodenum and help you digest fat right there. And then it's going to go into the small intestine. The small intestine, it's called the small intestine because of the diameter of the intestine. It's actually really, really long. It's about 4 times your height. So that's pretty long, right? It's all just wound up in there. The reason it's so long is because this is where your nutrients are absorbed, right? So your body wants plenty of opportunity to be able to absorb these nutrients. And so you have a really long pathway and a really long chance to absorb as much nutrients as you can. As the food travels through the small intestine, right, all the nutrients are absorbed. And then it goes into the large intestine. By the time it gets to the large intestine, it's just basically water and waste. And it's your large intestine's job to absorb the water. And so the large intestine is called large intestine because it has a larger diameter, but it's actually shorter. It's only about 1 times your height. So your large intestine is the same length as about your height. Okay. So here's where all the water gets absorbed. Attached to the large intestine is the appendix. We're not entirely sure what the appendix does. There's some ideas that it might have to do with your immune system, or it may be used to digest foods that we no longer eat anymore. But some people get what's called appendicitis, and basically their appendix is about to rupture or does rupture. It can be really painful, and they have to get their appendix removed, which is called an appendectomy. So that's where your appendix is here. It's really, really small. It's about the size of your pinky. So anyway, the waste or feces, right, travels through the large intestine and all the water gets absorbed. And then it finally ends up in your rectum, which is basically storage. And then it gets expelled through the anus. Okay. So those are the main organs of the digestive system. And basically it's just breaking down food into nutrients. Here is a picture that you can glue in from your textbook into your journal. And here are the basic steps that I just talked about. So basically, feel free to hit pause here and copy down all of the parts, all the steps for these different parts. Here's the second half all the way to the anus. Now, like I mentioned, right, with mechanical and chemical digestion, we need to know the difference between these two, right? So again, mechanical digestion is a physical change, right? The food is chewed, mixed, and churned. This happens in your mouth. It also happens in your stomach. And then chemical digestion is going to be a chemical change, right? This is when the acid, bile, saliva, all these enzymes are basically turning the food into mush. Your mouth, the saliva in your mouth will deal with this, right? Or helps with this. The liver is what makes bile, right? It gets stored in the gallbladder. Your stomach has acids. And then in your small intestine, really the duodenum, right, is where the bile gets added into there. So all of that is going to be involved in chemical digestion. Then on to the circulatory system. The circulatory system is basically all about the transport of blood and stuff with your blood, like nutrients, hormones, even waste gets transported in your blood. The way that I think about your circulatory system is I think of it like a big highway system. So basically, your heart powers this highway system in your veins and your arteries, and the pumping of your heart pushes your blood through all these veins and arteries, and it's transporting this blood, right? It's transporting oxygen to different parts of your body. So the heart is pumping blood to the lungs to pick up oxygen, and then it continues pumping to send that blood with the oxygen to your brain and your pinky toes and everywhere that it needs to go, right? You'll notice that in drawings, they always show blue and red to represent the arteries and the veins. Basically, what it's showing you is that the red is oxygenated blood. It's carrying oxygen to your pinky toe. And then the blue is bringing back the blood to the heart and the lungs to pick up more oxygen. But it's important to remember that your veins and your arteries are not really different colors. You do not have blue veins and red arteries. Everything is kind of like a red color. They just use blue and red to signify the arteries and the veins in pictures when we look at it in textbooks and stuff. So it's just trying to show you kind of what has oxygen and what doesn't have oxygen. What's also traveling in your veins and your arteries is going to be hormones from the endocrine system, which are chemical messages. We also have waste like carbon dioxide that's going to travel in your veins and your arteries, so that they basically get to the lungs, right, so that you can breathe out carbon dioxide. Other kinds of waste are going to be in your blood too, that your kidneys will clean out, which eventually turns into urine. We'll talk about that in a second. But basically, I think of the circulatory system as circulatory, right? Circulo, it goes round and round. So your blood is just going round and round and round over and over in your body, transporting different things, right? Oxygen, waste like carbon dioxide, hormones, things like that are all using this highway system to get from point A to point B in your body. And the heart is the one that's pumping all this, right? The heart is the one that's powering all this, your cardiac muscles. Here's the basic breakdown of what the heart looks like. Again, we have that red and that blue, right? So you'll notice the blue is going to the lungs, right? To the lungs to pick up that oxygen. And then it comes from the lungs and it gets red now, right? And it's going to go to your brain, right? It'll go up this way to your brain, or it'll go down this way to your pinky toe to deliver that oxygen to your parts of your body. Here's the picture from your textbook that you need. And onto the respiratory system, respirar, right? This is all about breathing. So you take in oxygen and a lot of other different kinds of gases, right? Through your nose and your mouth. It goes down here, right, into your two lungs. And it's basically your lungs' job to differentiate between the oxygen and the nitrogen and whatever else you breathed in. And so you have different parts of your lungs. Let me switch to over here, right? You have your nose and your mouth, you have your trachea, you have your bronchi, and your bronchioles are all here, and you have a diaphragm down here at the bottom. In your lungs, right, you have alveoli at the very tippy tips of your lungs, and that's actually where the exchange is going to happen, where your lungs are basically giving oxygen to your blood, right, and your blood is dropping off carbon dioxide at your lungs so that you can exhale it out. If you have asthma, you basically have a problem with your bronchi and your bronchioles. Kind of the walls are thickening, and so it makes the passageway more narrow. So that's why it feels hard to breathe when you have an asthma attack, because there's a smaller passageway for the air to pass through. The excretory system, which really includes your urinary system. This is how your body gets rid of waste. Your kidneys, which you have two of them, are basically filters, and they filter your blood. So they remove all of the waste from your blood and they send it down your ureters. You have two ureters that lead to your bladder, and your bladder basically stores this waste, which is urine, right? And then you pee it out through your urethra. So when you pee, all of that actually came from your blood. And so that's how your body gets rid of, one way that it gets rid of waste, right, is that the kidneys actually filter it out of your blood. It gets sent to your bladder, and then you urinate. So here's another picture, right? You have your two kidneys here, and then your ureters. You can actually live with one kidney. And if you don't have either of your kidneys, right, or they're not functioning, then people have to do what's called dialysis, where basically they hook you up to a machine and they run your blood through this machine, and the machine does the job of the kidneys. It actually filters your blood, and then they put the blood back in, right? And you have to go like every so often, right? Depending on your kidney function and things like that. But it's actually doing the job of your kidneys, right? It's cleaning out your blood. And so you have your two kidneys here, right? Your ureters lead down to your bladder, and then your urethra is the exit. We'll talk more about this when we talk about the frog, but we have two exits, right? We have the urethra and we have the anus, where that's how we get rid of waste. But frogs actually only have one exit, which is called the cloaca. And this is why their poop is kind of like watery, right? If you've ever seen bird poop, birds also have a cloaca. And so it's a mixture of poop and urine. So that's why bird poop is kind of watery. Then we have the endocrine system. This one can be a little hard to remember also, but you need to just remember hormones, right? So we have a bunch of glands all throughout our body that control different hormones that are in charge of different things. And another important thing about the endocrine system is that it actually doesn't have its own highway system. So it uses your blood, right, your circulatory system, to transport these hormones to wherever they need to go, okay? So let's talk about a few of these glands that produce these hormones. Your pituitary gland is actually called the boss gland because it's actually in charge of all of the other glands. And it's kind of funny because it's super tiny. It's literally the size of a pea, okay? One of the hormones that it controls is actually for growth. And so, people, if you've heard of like little people, right, they might have problems with their pituitary gland or this certain hormone that is released by the pituitary gland, which is why they don't grow to full height, right? Your thyroid is responsible for metabolism and energy. You have adrenal glands that are sitting on top of your kidneys. You probably have heard of a hormone called adrenaline that'll give people like superhuman strength, or allows people to like run faster when they feel like they're in a dangerous situation, right? Those are the adrenal glands. And so that releases adrenaline. Your pancreas releases a hormone called insulin that actually helps you break down food. It produces a hormone called insulin, right? And so that's, people who are diabetic are having problems with insulin, right? Their insulin production. And so that's a problem with their pancreas. And then we have ovaries and testes also. This is obviously a female, but the ovaries and the testes are also going to release hormones. You probably have heard people say like, oh, those teenagers and their crazy hormones, right? And so ovaries are going to release estrogen, and this is what's going to cause women to start menstruating, right, every month. And then testes are going to release a hormone called testosterone, and this is what causes things like, when guys' voices change, right, their voice starts to crack and then it gets deeper. That's going to be caused by testosterone, and those hormones start to get released during puberty, right? And so that's what causes puberty. Here are some of the different glands, right, from your textbook. And this one has the testes and it has the ovaries. And then you can see the adrenal glands on top of the kidneys. And then the thymus and the thyroid. Then we have the reproductive system. We've pretty much talked about this already because we talked about sexual and asexual reproduction, right? So obviously humans are going to reproduce sexually. We talked about how the male testes are going to produce the sperm, right? The female ovaries are going to produce the eggs. The most important thing here is that the sperm and the eggs are only going to have half of the parent's DNA, right? Because half plus half is equal to a whole, right? And so that's how we end up with the full DNA sequence for the offspring, okay? Then finally, we have the immune system, right? The immune system is going to protect against diseases, viruses, and bacteria. So we have white blood cells that are kind of like our little soldiers inside of our body that fight off any like bacterial invasion, right? Or a virus that is attacking us. They're the ones that are going to kill that virus or kill that bacteria. Your lymph nodes here, right, are whenever you have swollen lymph nodes, you basically it's showing that your body is kind of like fighting an infection, and so your doctor will sometimes like feel right here to see if your lymph nodes are swollen, because if they are, then that means like, hey, you're probably sick, right, from something. I wanted to take the time to talk a little bit about vaccines and how vaccines help your immune system. So a vaccine like the flu vaccine or the COVID vaccine, there's lots of vaccines out there that you have been taking like since you were little, right? They basically introduce usually a dead version of a virus into your body so that your white blood cells can start to build up a defense for it, okay? It's kind of like, let's say there's like a criminal on the loose, right? And the police department passes around pictures of the criminal, right? So that they know what to look for and they know like how to defeat this person, right? They know like some characteristics of this criminal, right? Like where he likes to hide, what his MO is, like stuff like that, right? That's basically what a vaccine does. A vaccine will introduce a virus, something bad, right, to your body in a way that's not dangerous, right? It's not going to affect your body, but your body can start to build up an immunity against this perpetrator, right? This disease or this virus. And then when you're actually exposed to it, your body already knows how to defeat this thing, right? So just like the police officers I was talking about, right? They have a picture of the guy and they know like what his behavior is and what to expect from him, so that when they encounter this bad guy, they know how to defeat it, right? And so that's basically what a vaccine is. Your body learns how to defeat this bad guy, and then that way when your friend sneezes on you, your friend that has COVID or something sneezes on you, then your body's already ready to defeat that disease or that virus or whatever it is. If you have any questions, let me know, and thank you for watching. Or you fell down during PE in the dirt, right? That would